Well, welcome to another episode of the Discover Headless Tech podcast interview. I am Marcelo Lewin, the Headless Creator. As always, right there. Get a hold of me, Marcelo at headlesscreator.com. Send me questions, comments, whatever you like. Just reach out to me and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Today, I'm going to have a really great conversation with my special guest, Andy Rossi. He's a senior product manager at DocuSign. We're going to be talking about design systems and their role in content model. It's a very important conversation to have because a good content model will either make your project successful or not. So, and you guys know that I'm very, very much into content modeling. So I can't wait to get started on that. But you know how it works. Before we get started, I'm going to tell you real quick about headlesscreator.com. Go get your free account there. Go to headlesscreator.com, click on sign up if you don't have an account. If you have an account, thank you so much. What will you get with that? It's free. All the courses are free. All the lessons are free. All the podcast episodes are free. You'll have access to this episode and all the other episodes, but you're also going to have access to a bunch of free upcoming streams, as you can see here, on all sorts of headless CMS technologies. You're also going to have access to a bunch of courses, including Content Modeling Weekly, Discover Headless Tech Course, all of the Headless CMS courses, a couple of boot camps, which are awesome, and lots more coming up. So get your free account. You're not going to regret it. Go to www.headlesscreator.com. And I say that because some of you are listening on audio only and can't see the screen. So having said that, I'm going to go ahead and remove the share screen because we're going to bring in Andy. Now, before we do that, I do want to remind you that you can ask questions in the comments area. So if you have any questions, just type them in there and I'll ask Andy and we'll go from there. So with that said, Andy, welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Great. How are you?
Doing well. I mean, it's a little rainy out, but hey, can't complain.
We've had some weird weather in our area. Where are you located?
I'm in Dayton, Ohio.
Got it. I'm in Southern California, and our weather has been either super hot, like in the 90s, which is really weird for us, or I think yesterday we had snow in a couple of cities, which is another thing that's weird for us. So I'm not sure what's going on.
It's not boring, I guess.
It's not boring, that's for sure. Exactly. Anyway, welcome. I'm glad to have you here. Thank you so much. You tell us a little bit about what you do. You're a senior product manager, but tell us how you got into technology and what do you work on?
Yeah, I mean, I've been working in some manner of web technology for the past, I guess, 15 years. I mean, it's kind of weird saying that now, but it's been a lot of agency work. So mostly marketing. I was originally a designer that then got really into coding. So for majority of my career, it was engineer work. And I got to learn a lot of neat trades. I got to work on some really interesting projects that informed basically my trajectory a bit. But when I joined DocuSign, it was kind of a weird spot where there were no real engineers in the marketing side of things yet. It was a new team. So we were able to kind of start from scratch and found that I'd be better served as a product manager working on the front end strategy for what we're doing. So first time as a product manager, but I got to continue doing the same work I'm used to. And that really digs into what we're talking about today, because the previous work I did was early on, or actually later in my engineering career, was with design systems. And I got to work on some pretty gnarly ones, some white labeled design systems for financial institutions, and a lot of back and forth between engineering and design. And once I got to DocuSign, I got to focus on helping drive the CMS strategy. So using all that and putting it together, I came with this, funky opinion about how things should be working together. And I would love to talk about it today.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm intrigued about what you said about white label design systems, because I've never heard that term actually. And we're going to get into design systems in just a second. But what got you into like coding? You said you jumped into coding. Like what attracted you? And what do you code?
So when I was in school, I was going for computer science initially, and
Okay.
I mean, a good school, but the I don't know. It's hard to describe that when a lot of the professors were just they were in it for far too long, and I don't know, the passion wasn't there anymore. I kind of started to drift a little bit and found that there's a whole design side to this type of work
Mm,
where you could learn to build websites. Oh my gosh. You could
right.
do animation with code, action script. Oh my gosh. So it was kind of a new direction, and I found a lot of interest there. So I went fully into that area. There was no real design programming career. So I walked out with a design degree, but kept doing coding. After that, like at first job, it was code. I got, over the years, got to experience all these different languages. And then eventually, before I was doing a lot of hardcore engineering work, landed on a lot of React projects, Node, and all those things, but started to experiment with headless CMSs and
Hmm.
how that worked together. So it
I could
all came together, I think.
I could totally relate to your story about the professors not having the passion and stuff, because I remember this was way back in the late 90s. I was going for computer information systems, and the internet was just getting started, and they were teaching VB, Visual Basic, and I'm like, this isn't the future. And they sometimes you know more than the professor anyway.
Yeah.
So I ended up dropping out. I dropped out of college, never looked back, and got into the web literally in like 98. So way at the beginning, right? And I'm glad I did that, because college wasn't able to keep up with the changes, right? They were way behind and they couldn't keep up with it. So I could totally relate to that story. But okay, cool. So let's get started. Let's talk about real quick a design system, because I want to go back to that white label design system. I want you to expand on that a bit more. But let's define a design system for those that aren't familiar with what design systems are.
Okay. A design system is well, there's many definitions, but the one I like the best is that it's a collection of best practices, visual and non-visual, to help scale design. So that could include components, elements like that, but it can also include voice and tone for how to even speak about the design, how to write copy to surround the design, and all the documentation around how to actually execute that and to teach other teams to use it. So it's basically the system to allow for scale for use of that system.
Now that sounds a little bit like style guide. Also, do design systems also incorporate style guides?
They can, yes. So there are some, I guess, I'm going to use the word spectrum a lot in this conversation because it seems to be a huge balance between two different things, no matter the topic. But with design systems, you can go heavy into one side, which is all inclusive, very detailed, very documented, and dense
Mm-hmm.
library of utilities for design. So a style guide and pattern library can be a part of that, but it's also the foundations of that. It's also how do you use it in all these different channels? Is it web? Is it email? And then for the tone and voice, again, how you write for the design. That makes sense.
It makes total sense, because I'm used to seeing design systems focus basically on the components, right, and how they're represented.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen style guides completely separate from design systems. But I think it does make sense, because at the end of the day, it's all interrelated.
Right.
But you mentioned voice, you mentioned web, mobile. So that means that a design system is tied to a delivery channel. So does that mean that you don't have just one design system? You'll have multiple design systems, one for each delivery channel?
You can have one design system that covers all channels. If it's, again, this depends on the organization, where some may have one or two design systems depending on the channel, like if it's a product versus marketing, or a situation where a company may have multiple, even more design systems, like some that are still in use but are being deprecated, some that are trying to, like a new design system that is also informing different variations. Like Spotify has a lot of design systems because each team has their own way, or a team in charge of a product inside of Spotify has their own design, I don't know, language, but it all comes from the same foundation that Spotify sets as a company. So the same fonts, colors, spacing systems, those things should be set the foundation that others can build off of.
Got it.
So yeah, depending on the use of the design system, it doesn't have to be a mirrored version of it. It can be the same color, the same fonts. The brand has to match, but you have different ways of executing on that brand.
So let's bring it down to earth here for practical reasons. And it's like, okay, so give an example of a design system, like components, like explain how is a design system used by designers, by developers, by authors, or are they, you know?
Right. All right, here we go. So let's focus on the design side of it, where we have a bunch of maybe flats that represent a page, right? And you want to be able to systemize that because you want to be able to reuse parts of it, because you can't scale unless you can systemize. Otherwise, you're doing bespoke pages or bespoke emails, right? So what you do is take that design and you break it into the reusable chunks. This is very similar, to
it's starting to sound like content modeling here.
A little bit. And what you want to do is take the smallest bits, the foundation, the spacing, the color, the fonts, and then build larger pieces with those. Like atomic design is the biggest name in design system methodology, but it's very true. You start small and you build larger and larger pieces until you have more complex executions on a design system. So start with a button, then you have a banner with a button with a heading, and then you go to a hero that has the same heading, a CTA button, but now you have imagery usage that is also part of the design system, because that's the tone and voice, and also the asset part of it. What visual assets are you allowed to use to present the tone of what it is you're selling? Because brand correct imagery, you can't just have any image. You have to have a specific type of imagery to fit within the design system. Thinking like stock photography doesn't work, but you want lifestyle photography that's outside versus inside an office. Those types of decisions are part of the design system documentation.
So let's stick with those example objects that you talked about: banner, the button, pull down menu, whatever, drop down menu, however, whatever that is, right? That's part of the design system. But that sounds like, for example, let's stick with a button as an example, just to make it very concrete. The button could be blue and it has some attributes, right? That's in the design system. It's defined there. You use that button and that's how it appears. But that's tied to the delivery channel.
Right.
In this case, most of the time, you mentioned page, right? Page relates basically to web. What about if you have a mobile app? Do you have a design system or another section within the design system that says, okay, this blue button on the web page is going to be this kind on a mobile app?
Yes.
And then I want to jump into a voice activated system. How do we represent anything like that?
Right. So and you're talking about variations on a button. Like if we want to use that as an example, it's the best example because it's also one of the most complex pieces of a design system because of all the different states. You have the primary, secondary, tertiary, whatever you want to call it, blue, red, disabled states, the sizing, like you mentioned, at different screen resolutions and channels. A button for the web at desktop will probably look slightly different for the mobile version, or even for a web or an actual application variation on that button.
Right.
But what's inside the button remains consistent. What is the text in the button? What is the button doing? Where is it going? And then what you're changing is you're creating a version of the button that's the best tool for the job, depending on the channel. You want it a little larger, so it's easier to tab, right?
And right there, I want to interject and say, I think that's where content modeling is about to begin. What goes in the button, and we're going to get into this, but because this whole conversation is about how does design system relate to content modeling. At that point, I believe content modeling kicks in and storing content. And we're going to jump into that. But we said mobile app or mobile website. But what about a mobile app, right? That's an actual app, or for example, a Google Assistant or the A lady. I can't say the name because I have her here and then she'll speak up during my live interview here. But the A lady, we all know who she is.
Well, now this is why I mentioned tone and voice earlier, because that's all you have with outside of content strategy to help build this. you have the voice to actually interact with these devices. What is the tone of, you request something, what is the tone that comes back to you? Is it a playful tone? Is it a serious tone? And it's not even what it's saying, it's the attitude. And that is also part of the brand. And that can go into a design system. But that's two parts. So it's what it's saying and how it's saying it. And with the content model, it's the what it's saying. With the design and brand requirements, that's how it's set. What that mechanism is, that depends on the execution, but essentially they're very connected. But where that comes to your ears, it's very connected. But on the back end, it's slightly separate.
It should be, right? And that's that. Now we jump into content modeling, which I think you said it perfect. It should be what it's saying, not how it's saying it or how it's displayed, right? That you should not have in your content model. So first, everybody should know because they come to Headless Creator. But for those few that don't know, what is a content model? Let's give a quick overview of that.
Well, it's okay if I go with my definition here. It's
of course.
All right. It's really a collection of components that, well, it's a map really of all these different ways that content can be structured and their relationship with each other. So I just want to be very high level there. There can be different variations in that, such as, it's a collection of content types that do this, that, and the other. But
right.
At the highest level, it's just a map of how content relates to each other. What is the content that you're going to be providing to your service, to your customers? And that is based on what the content strategy is really defining.
Okay, so we've defined design system, which displays how it will be displayed or how it will be presented. Let's say presented because you don't display it in a Google Assistant. You present it, right, through voice.
Right.
And now we have a content model, which is what are we presenting, right? The content that will come through. So is that the relationship between a design system and a content model, or what's your thought on the relationship between the both of them?
Okay, here we go. This is the spectrum again, right? The answer to that is it really depends.
Isn't it always that?
Yeah, I hate to say that as the answer, but it's always the answer. It depends. Right. It's depending on how much the channel